Welcome to Planning Phase Syndicate. This is my first Jump to Lightspeed deck tech for set 4. Yes, I'm excited. Yes, I got some favorite leaders. But man, today I really want to come across and talk a little bit about Admiral Piett, his capital ships, and how it will ride. We're going to be dissecting my Admiral Piett deck with a 27 health base. So to begin with, we'll talk a little bit about Piett. We talk about him. He's one of my favorite new leaders of the set. Very, very excited to be able to actually bring him onto the table and talk a little bit about um somebody that feels like control, but participates in mid-range into an aggro deck. Like it's crazy. This deck is just so wild, and there's so many different notes that you could take with it. Currently, what I'm testing is this is all before the set is dropped. So everything that I've been testing on the table is just with the preview cards that we have up to 2 weeks before the set. I'm sure there'll be a few more cards that will possibly make it in to the set. The first side note that I have is I use the 27 health base because it allows you to reduce the maximum card amount in your deck to 45, which allows you to be a lot more accurate. Currently, I'm running 46 cards, but I will probably easily cut one of them to get it back down to the 45. Normally in a control-ish deck, I'm not as worried about hitting that 45, 50 card range, but with this one, I really want to be able to pull capital ships, and I want to be able to pull other ships that will come after, or other cards that will be able to come after and take care and clean up the board. So essentially, Admiral Piett, I call it, he's going to spam you some capital units. He works very well with a capital unit. You are going to be ensured to be able to hit very big and very effective in this deck. You'll be able to keep their board clean, or you'll be able to just go straight into base and just take care of them. This deck can be very overwhelming. If you have somebody that's not played against this deck can just really trounce everything. And I believe that while maybe in sealed it might not be as good, when you put 4 sets of cards together, this deck just is nuts. Currently, a lot of people are focusing on hyper ramp decks. I am using only 5 ramp cards currently right now. There is a possibility of expanding that. If I did go to the 30 health base and wanted to have the more, the 50 cards, I would expand it with more ramp cards. But currently right now, I really am focusing on getting small amounts of ramp and then being able to hit with 1 or 2 really big ships at a time. With that being said, why don't we check out the deck? So essentially, the way that this deck is it's a kind of there's not a lot of middle ground. You have a lot of low flying units to begin with, and then you go quickly ramp up and hit your heavy units so that you can just take control of the board. One side note is I have a larger sideboard than currently legally allowed. That is because this is the sideboard I am testing with this style of deck. There's a consideration of changing some of the things out. So to begin with, I'll go ahead and start. I've got 2 Admiral Piett units that allow you to ambush in a larger units, 3 Kylo silencers, 2 TIE bombers, and then here's the spice, man. 3 unlicensed headhunters. We'll come back to why I like those in a second. We have 2 power failure, 3 prepare for takeoff, 3 of the Black Sun enforcers, 3 phase 3 dark troopers, 3 merciless contests, 3 resupplies, 3 of the gladiator ships, 2 of the resupply carriers, 3 ruthless raiders, 3 planetary bombardments, 3 of our quintessent assault cruisers, 3 of Devastator Red, and 2 of Devastator Green. So as we talked a little bit about at the beginning of the episode, like I said, the big focus is being able to get your capital shipped out early because they're very hard to deal with. We haven't seen a leader that's able to give us really large units super early in a churn without sacrificing so much board state. Admiral Piett has a built-in, if for an action you can reduce the cost of a capital ship just as a native part. Once he's deployed, he reduces every capital ship by 2. So when you have 8 resources, you can essentially play 2 6-cost capital ships in 1 churn, which is just nuts. Just nuts. I have played 2 Ruthless Raiders in 1 churn, and people just don't know what to do when you do that. So for our turn one plays, I like Piat as a good turn one play. He's kind of a good sentinel. A lot of people will see it and go, I could just ignore it. And then later on, if they ignore it, he's doing the one damage, which is not very good, but he's also able to just let things ambush in. And as you're going to see in a few minutes, we're going to be able to hit our turn three, turn four. We're going to be able to hit capital ships. And Piat just becomes amazing. So if they don't kill him, you're just able to take him off the board. So he's really good for, like, in control decks, people will use like some sort of spell to remove him, and you don't really care that much. I mean, he's what I would call a nice to have in this deck. Like, he's not mandatory to make the deck function. He's just, I'm going to give you a little bit more leniency to be able to clear out your space units as you go. But he is great. He is a pseudo sentinel if people know who he is, and if not, then he just sits there. And then, by the way, when he sits there, at some point, people regret him just being there because you ambush out a ruthless raider and they just cry a little bit. Other good turn one plays are prepare for takeoff. If you don't get a lot of capital ships in your hand, this is a great card to be able to flood your hand with capital ships. It's also super great if you're playing against some sort of a pillage or force throw deck where they just want to strip your hand for hand hate. Those are a thing in set 3. They're going to be a thing in set 4. Not, in my opinion, quite as much as people think they will be, but I do think at least at the beginning of the set, we're going to see a lot of hand hate. And this just, you get two cards because they're 2 vehicle units. The majority of our deck is vehicles. It allows us to be able to just tutor things that we need. So, for example, if you are playing against an aggro deck and you don't have a sentinel in hand for space or for ground, this just helps you be able to pull that space unit, and then it helps you cycle through your deck a little bit faster. Remember, you're 5 cards light, so it helps us move through that deck so much faster than we ever thought. The TIE Bomber is a concession draw. It's actually better in the later game when you get Devastator down, but it is also nice because it does pressure them. It lets them redistribute damage. And for the most part, they don't kill it. We don't run upgrades in this deck currently right now. So this TIE Bomber is really kind of just there to help dirtle churns as you need to be able to dish out some damage. If somebody's got a very low health base and they're very worried about taking damage on their base and they can't aggro you fast enough, sometimes this unit can be very useful. I genuinely find it's better mid game to be able to play one of these as kind of like a secondary card once you play a capital ship. The other 2 cards is Kylo Silencer and Unlicensed Headhunter. If you're playing it at the beginning, Unlicensed Headhunter doesn't really do much because you're not attacking their base. Your goal is not to go aggro to their base. So in the late game, that card's worthless. You don't really want to deal with it. But to begin with, like, that card is a great turn 1 play. We don't have a lot of space that has a 3/2 to begin with on turn 1. The card it replaced was the Outlaw Coronavirus spaceship capital ship. That's a 3 cost 3/5. You can play that card instead. I got really sick of my opponents ramping off of it, so I stopped playing. And what I'm doing is because I'm not going to base, I'm using these units to control their board. I don't care as much. I don't want them to ramp, and I don't care as much about attacking base. I don't care about the 5 health. There is a discussion that could be had. You could replace it with that. You can use Piat to play that out for the same cost. And then you have a 3/5 in space. It is really good to have a 3/5 in space, but I will forewarn you, if they could kill it and ramp off it, and you have no ramp, you can become a sad person. So I have substituted this in. It does have Saboteur, so like if I want to kill something that's not a Sentinel, that's the other benefit to it. So like, let's say they have initiative and they're running blue and they throw a Concord down and protecting whatever ship that they're going to put a pilot on. Boom, you don't have to worry about that Concord down. You just shoot right past it. Like, I don't care about you. And that's the nice thing about that ship. It's still in testing. Obviously, this is like my first my first deck tech for set 4. So this is kind of, my theory is that this could be possibly a really decent card that people will not expect, and get you a vehicle unit out of there. The other is the TIE Silencer. Great card. It's a 3/2. If you're playing against hand hate decks, this is a great card. You just throw this in the discard pile and play it out of your discard pile. I love this card so much. I love it even more if somebody doesn't think about what it is and they spark my hand and throw it away, and I go, oh, thanks, I'll just play it out of my discard pile. So I love that card. Essentially, it allows me to play something for the most part, no matter what. And it gives you the 3/2 in space, so you can kill off whatever their turn one play is before they make that vehicle too big. The turn two play, this is kind of dependent on what style of deck you're playing against. If you're playing against like a very heavy aggro deck, you have to either use Merciless Contest or your Sentinels. Sentinels are always a great choice. They're great board control. You don't have to ramp right away. Like ramping is in my opinion always secondary. If you're playing against some of these like extreme aggro decks or these weird trick combo decks that can push in 7 to 8 damage a turn, these Sentinels slow that down. Merciless Contest also does that, especially if your turn one play was, oh, hey, guess what? I'm going to play this that Saboteur unit. And then all of a sudden they have initiative. And guess what? They decided to upgrade their Poe ship with Poe. Well, Merciless Contest, whatever. I played a unit. I had to sacrifice a unit. I don't care. If you don't have a unit on board because you played Prepare for Takeoff, even better. You're just like, yeah, sorry, you don't have a turn one play anymore. So yeah, a lot of decks are these Piett decks I'm not seeing run this specific card. I like this card for a lot of reasons. It also allows me to be able to kill off my Ruthless later in the game. But we'll get to that a little bit. If you aren't worried about damage to the base because they're either going lower or they're not able to put 7-8 damage out a turn, Resupply is great turn two play because essentially that just puts you up into the category of being able to then do bring Piett out a turn early, which is amazing. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, right? Because now you're at the point where you have to decide, did you ramp or not? And this is kind of where this slide is a little confusing, right? Because if you ramped on turn two, that puts you at 4 resources. Turn 3, you're going to be able to place your 5th resource down. If you didn't ramp, then you're playing it on turn 4. The ramp is the biggest thing. And so if you did not ramp, your best plays are to be able to ramp, play Prepare for Takeoff, or play another Piett unit. If you have already gone ahead and ramped, now is the time where you can get your capital ships out. Are you worried about them destroying your ship? Are you playing a control deck and you don't have a bunch of units out? You might want to be concerned about Power of the Dark Side or something like that or Merciless Contest that can take off your one Devastator unit. Are you playing against an aggro deck? Well, and against an aggro deck, the best thing is let's flip Piett, and Piett becomes either a Sentinel or he becomes the position where they have to ignore him and you just start bringing capital ships in on the deep. And so on turn 3, you can, with your so you have your 3 resources on turn 2. You play your 4th resource turn 3. If you ramped, you're on 5 resources. Because he plays a ship a 1 cost cheaper, you can flip him and play a ship. You can also just play a ship. You can play a Ruthless Raider. You can play a Gladiator Destroyer, which that card we never really played before. Guess what we're playing now? We're playing that card in this deck because that card is amazing because you give Sentinel something. So you got a Piett on the ground. They've got some big buffed up thing. Just screw it. Let them attack that. It'll stop them so that it saves your capital ship. It also lets you play the resupply carrier, which is even crazier if you are going to play the resupply carrier because then now you're ramping again and you will be quickly at 8 resources, 7 to 8 resources within the next turn. And at that point, with you being 2 to 3 resources ahead, it's just so hard for them to stop you from playing big things or multiple things in a turn. Obviously, the best combo is to be able to resupply on turn 2, flip Piett turn 3, and then be able to play a Ruthless Raider or a resupply carrier, one of the two, being able to play that out. And then your next turn is when you can start your combo. So your next turn is if you have a capital ship out and you want to start doing damage, you can play Planetary Bombardment. That's 12 indirect damage, baby. If for whatever reason you're playing against an aggro deck that doesn't have a bunch of pilots built up, they're playing a lot of smaller units, they don't have quite 6, 7, 8 damage, you could play a Devastator. So your next turn after you bring Piett out, you could play the Devastator on turn 4 if you've resupplied and you're a resource ahead. Because what that does is that does the 4 damage to wherever you want it, and then it puts a big 9/6 body on the ground. If they do not kill that unit, you're pretty solidly gonna start winning this game. And that's because you have the ability to play Planetary Bombardment next turn, which allows you to deal all indirect damage wherever the bloody heck you want it. So you can dump 12 into base and then swing for Devastator for another 9. Oh, guess who just did 21 damage to your base? If you've been pinging their base with Piett or Piett number 2 or whatever, or maybe like a Sentinel that they ignore, you have killed a 25 health base and the game's over. There's nothing they can do. Like it doesn't matter. Even if they have a 30 health base, you're so close to it. If they haven't been attacking your base, you're just golden. That's the dream play. That doesn't happen all the time. So if that doesn't happen and you haven't hit the dream play and you have to hold out, you can wait to flip Piett. I also recommend paying attention, because if they can flip their leader and kill your Piett, you're going to feel a little bit sad because you're not going to be able to play Devastator next turn. Being able to play Devastator into that planetary bombardment is just nuts, right? So sometimes you got to pay attention to your flip turn. You don't always have to flip when you have 5 resources. If you don't need the Piett 2 cost reduction, you don't have to flip them. You just don't. One of the best things is, like, if they're playing a control deck and you flip him and play your Ruthless Raider, then flip him, you've been able to do the 2 damage to the board. And then they kind of have to come back and say, oh, what am I going to do? If they play a Power of the Dark Side or Merciless Contest, you can just kill off Ruthless Raider, and now you've done 4 damage to their base and 4 damage to a unit, which isn't like the best thing you can do, but it's still a pretty decent play for being able to have them have to waste their turn doing it. But essentially, if you have it flipped, now's the time to flip. You get your extra resource, jam your Devastator. That's what you want to do, is jam that Devastator, jam that Ruthless Raider, or jam that Gladiator Star Destroyer, because that will help you stop them from doing it. If you don't have anything, just play Planetary Bombardment. If you got a capital ship out there, that's just 12 indirect damage. They got to put it all over the place. So, like, I have found, like, the best play will be is if I have a Planetary Bombardment, and I just have the Ruthless Raider out, and they do a bunch of damage to all their ships, and then the next turn you flip, or the next turn you have a Devastator, you play your Devastator, and guess what? You got 4 damage. You could just pick off the units they left 1 health with, and next thing you know, it's like a board wipe for it. We talk really about the end game. That's all of our end game, all of our turn like 5 through the end is all almost identical. The difference is we have 2 ships that we haven't talked about yet. One is the Green Devastator, and one is the Quintus Assault Carrier, which is, oh my gosh, amazing, because it's a 7/8. It comes in, it could take a lot of their units off the board. It takes them, it puts them in a resource war, so that it builds your resources even more, which you don't even care about at that point. You're not even trying to build resources. You're literally just using that stupid guy to kill things. And so, like, if they put a Falcon down, boom, I'm going to run into it. And guess what? I still got 5 health left. Go ahead, put another Falcon down. You know, what are you going to do? Play a bigger Falcon and kill it? Fine, I don't care. It's a great card that costs 8. With Piett, it costs either 6 or 7. By the time you're able to play it, it just does so many other things. The other best thing too is, like, you could play a Gladiator that gives it Sentinel to force people to attack into it. You don't get the resources, but man, you sure as heck get, like, it could just live forever. The other big card that we have talked about is what I would call Daddy Devastator. Like, this is the Devastator that we got in set 1. This is one of the best cards in the whole bloody game for villain, especially if you're playing villain green. I love this card so much. The big idea with this guy and with this card is to be able to use it to control their board. So if they have a ship they've built up or a leader they built out, slam that Devastator, murder it, and now you just put a Sentinel in space. You just put a Sentinel in space. If you have Piett, this card is even more insane, because you can literally ambush this stupid thing, and so you could do your 10 damage somewhere, ambush it in, and then overwhelm to the base. It's like a wannabe Planetary Bombardment, but for 8 resources if your Piett's alive, 9 if your Piett's dead. But if you've been using your Quintus Carrier, you can ramp up farther with their units, and then that Devastator really doesn't feel that bad to play. I've been able to play a Devastator and 2 TIE Bombers in a turn. That's how many stupid resources I have. So that's really kind of what you're doing to do it. Your Red Devastator is kind of the combo with that, and Planetary Bombardment is what you want to get off. If they don't have a way of stopping that, you're pretty much guaranteed for the most part to win. Remember, though, where do you put the thing? can you do enough damage that they can't out damage you the next turn if they claim, and you could just win by swinging in with some. That's always the big thing that you have to pay attention to. Let's talk a little bit about the sideboard. Again, my sideboard's mainly more controlish. I moved Overwhelming Barrage out of the main to the sideboard. There is a conversation where it could come back to the main. I think we have to talk through that. Like those TIE bombers aren't as super effective. Um, your better bet sometimes is to claim and play a merciless contest in turn 2. It allows you to keep extra cards for hand hate. It's kind of an up in the air thing. You have to kind of make like a different type of decision. And one of the things is that's why I moved it to the sideboard for now. So we don't know what the current meta is. I don't know what the current meta is going to be. I have Power Failure in as a main deck card. It might not even need to be there. But against some of these decks that can just throw a Poe in something, like, I don't know. Sometimes I just want to get rid of it. I've seen a black one swing in, and then they eject Poe, and then he's on the ground, and now you can't figure out how to deal with him. And it's just like they can put another pilot in that ship, and it just becomes a nightmare. So Overwhelming Barrage is something that I have moved to the side for now, but will probably come back into the main. Relentless is there for control decks. That's just plain simple. If I were running a 30 health base that made me carry 5 more cards, Relentless could be possibly 2 of those that I would put in there. Relentless is just a great card all around. And sometimes if we see, for example, if we see a lot more people playing like Spare the Target or I don't clear the field or waylay and stuff like that, Relentless then becomes really powerful because you can play it and they can't stop you from doing it. Right now, I have not found it super beneficial. I just win by killing things, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to maybe in the future utilize it in a different manner. Force Choke, Open Fire, Turbo Laser, Blast Salvo, all those cards are just, I need to murder something and this is how I'm going to do it. Currently, I have those sided out. I'm going under the assumption that I use those if I need to control their board a little bit more or less if I get to the point where I need to bring them in against aggro. Aggro can be a semi-tough matchup because we're ramping and we're controlling to begin with and then ramping. Unless they're going insanely wide, we usually don't worry too much. And then Yularen was kind of the last consideration, right? I got Yularen in there if I need healing. I got a lot of green units. Not saying that Yularen wouldn't be great in the main, but because he doesn't really do anything other than heal, I have left him out currently and figured if we need to get into the healing regiment, that's what we'll do. Going back, this is my deck. This is like I said, I have Power Failures in the main. Those could probably be moved out. They might not be very beneficial. We don't know really until we see it. They could be substituted in for a lot of other cards to round this out. I mean, you could put another Piett in there. You could put in Overwhelming Barrages. But currently right now, this is kind of what I've been playing and testing with online. Well, all right, that's kind of my deck. That's kind of what I do. I believe the deck has a lot of legs. This is obviously the first iteration. There's probably a few other ships that might get spoiled that I will want to add in there. I could do a deck update. If you guys really like these things, I'll do like an update to the deck and kind of go through, some of the things that I would change, some of the things that I would maybe do a little bit different based on the meta. I don't know. But for now, currently, this is my deck, and I hope that you like it. If you're watching this and you like our channel, please hit that subscribe button. Man, we would love to have you as a subscriber. We post content at least 2 to 3 times a week. We do a weekly podcast that we put out in little blocks on here, or you can subscribe on our Podbean and you could get the whole podcast in its like current form without any other, breaking apart. And you could just listen to the block of an hour and a half to 2 hours of us rambling about cool things or stupid things and different things like that. But join us right here on YouTube, and I'll tell you what, come back for the next deck tech that we'll have, which will probably be an Admiral Trench because he's one of my favorite new characters. With that being said, thank you all. Have a good night, and we'll see you on the flippity flop.